Hello everyone, welcome and thanks for joining our first webinar, lunchtime webinar in a series of webinars the Poverty Alliance are doing on taking a human rights-based approach to tackling poverty as part of our Rights in Action project. So today I'm delighted to have a great panel of speakers who I will shortly introduce. But before I do so, I just wanted to say a little bit about why we're doing this series of webinars and tell you a little bit about our Rights in Action project at the Poverty Alliance. So Rights in Action is a 3-year project that we are conducting at the Poverty Alliance, working with communities across Scotland, to raise awareness of how human rights can be used as a tool to tackle poverty, and also thinking about how we can support our member organisations as well as individuals to use human rights-based approaches to address poverty. So the panel principles are a well-known tool in Scotland used as a way to take a human rights-based approach to address poverty and to address infringements of human rights in Scotland. So the panel principles stand for participation, accountability, non-discrimination and equality, empowerment, and lastly, legality. And in our first webinar, we're focusing on the principle of participation. And we're delighted to be joined by Laura Millar, who is the Strategic Manager at Fife Gingerbread, and Jenny Wartnaby, who is the Participation and Research Officer at Zero Tolerance, and Stephen Drew, who we are lucky to have at Poverty Alliance, and who is the Community Participation Officer and supports the End Poverty Edinburgh group in Edinburgh. So I'm going to pass over to them shortly, and so they'll be talking about their learning from work that they've done involving people with lived experience of poverty to be involved in the work of their organisation, as well as on reflections of how they think that the groups that they've worked with have been involved in decision making in Scotland, both nationally or locally. So once we've done the presentations, there will be time for a Q&A. So please do put any questions that you have for Laura, Jenny, Stephen in the Q&A, and we will get to those later on in the webinar. So firstly, I'm going to pass over to Laura Millar. So on you go, Laura.
Thanks. Just bear with me. I'm going to faff about just getting my slides up. So hopefully this works okay.
I can see them. So
you can see them? Oh, excellent. So thank you very much for having me. As Laura said, I am Laura from Fife Gingerbread. So we're a wee children and families charity in the Fife area. We support about 750 families every year. Mostly families affected by poverty, trauma, adverse childhood experiences and domestic abuse. So a really wide range of multiple and complex issues affecting the families that we're working with. And all the projects are funded locally through national grants through Children's Services and parental employment activity and things as well. So mixed bag of families that we're working with, but also funding to make it all possible. So in terms of participation, because Laura has us on a timer, so I better move on. I decided just to shape what I was going to say using Arnstein's ladder of participation, because it's a nice way to sort of describe it. And I think probably something really important to caveat this with is I'm not saying we're getting it all right at Fife Gingerbread. I'm not saying that we're doing participation and it's like this magic example. But I do think we're on a journey with participation. I think it takes a lot of time and sort of patience to really think about it and to get it right. I think you hear a lot of chat about we're doing co-production and we're working in co-design, and actually sometimes the reality is not quite the case. So I think it's about an investment in the whole process. So I was just going to share some examples of things that I do think we're doing quite well at Fife Gingerbread that are hopefully helpful to other people as well. I'll go from the bottom up as a ladder tends to do. In terms of consultation, I think when people talk about, in my experience, participation and co-production, they can be quite dismissive of consultation, but I think it has an important role to play, and it definitely has an important role to play in Fife Gingerbread. And examples of that are we do an annual snapshot every year, so that's a survey that we put out to all the families we've been working with, and we look for around about at least a sort of 25 to 30% sample of families, and that provides us with some really rich data on everything from equal opportunities to how we're doing as an organisation, what people think, and some of those big issues that are affecting families like housing and child maintenance. And we're asking for their opinions, and then that informs decisions that we're making as an organisation, like what funding we might want to look at, or how we want to shape services, or tweaks that we maybe need to make sure that we're really responding to what families are telling us. And we also do a lot of work helping families to connect in with research that's happening. So whether that's research that we're commissioning at Fife Gingerbread, and we do make a real effort, and I know that's hard in a really tight funding context, but we feel that that's really important to get that external voice, and we enable families that we're working with to take part in that. So that consultation phase is an important part of participation, getting those opinions, but it's very much gathering opinions, and then we take that back into the organisation, and we work as staff and board members to look at how we're going to use that information and actively put it into practice. So the next ladder, sort of rung of the ladder, where I think we're doing quite a lot of work, is around partnership. So that bit of work around working really closely with the families that we are luckily enough to be in their lives and getting to know them and meeting their kids, so how we can work collaboratively. And some nice examples that we've got of that is we have a parents forum. That's a group that myself and Kath, one of the managers, that we facilitate. They're an amazing group. I think we should know this, there's 9 or 10 members at the moment. And they are a group of parents who have been supported or are being supported by our projects. They meet with Kath and I every fortnight on a Tuesday night on Zoom. So they're really committed to the organisation, and the membership's changed as people move on and new people join us. But they're becoming a really core part of the organisation, and we're really committed to the organic growth of that group. And it evolved from a little bit of research we did, where we realised there was a real appetite for families to get a bit more involved in how we were shaping services at Fife Gingerbread. So so the group started as literally like a blether. Kath and I purposely went into that with no agenda other than people want to chat to us, let's chat to them. And it's evolved into a group that really informs our funding. It really involves the development of the organisation. They're a really good sense check for challenges or ideas that we're shaping. They're very quick to tell us what's good and bad, not in good or bad language, but they do tell us where we're getting things right and areas we could improve. And it gives me, as a manager who can become quite disconnected from families, a group of families where they have built relationships together. They know me, not as Laura, manager at Fife Gingerbread, but as Laura, mum of 2, moving house, and what I'm getting up to. So we have real relationships that kind of remove some of that power imbalance, and it really helps me to keep properly connected to what families need and want from us, and that's a really important partnership. So other areas where I think in terms of partnership with families that we're doing some nice work is around volunteering. We have about 50 volunteers usually on the books, if you like, at Fife Gingerbread. A lot of those are parents who've come through the project, so they have been supported and then they want to give something back and be part of delivering that support, and that is really special, and it gives us a real connection to improve what we're doing and really work closely with families. This sounds simple, but worker autonomy, we really invest in our staff. They know how to do their jobs, we trust them to do their jobs. And we don't have like a set model that we're imposing on families. We really do that. You said we did approach where we're saying to staff, you know what your job is, you know what you're funded to do, respond to what your families are telling them you need and work collaboratively. So we really work hard to embed that from the frontline service delivery. And then we have a participation policy, which we developed with support from Poverty Alliance, actually, and also with the input of our parents forum. So that really clearly sets some boundaries of how we're going to work with families, how we are going to keep them safe, how we're going to thank them for their participation as well. And then working up the ladder, I think we're doing some work in the delegated power area where we're starting to transfer some of that decision making to this language of citizens, but for us, that's families. So the examples of that are parents are part of our interview panels. They design their own questions that they want to ask frontline staff that are coming into the organisation. And actually their input is weighted just the same as Kath or I or whoever the manager is doing interviews. So that's really an equal partnership. We've made a really conscious, deliberate decision to work towards a lived experience workforce. So at the moment, about a third of our workforce have come through our projects, and actually that requires investment. It requires sometimes a little bit more effort in terms of time and coaching, but what we get back from that pays for that in spades, if you like, in terms of improving what we're doing and being really authentic in Fife. We do a lot of participatory budgeting. So this morning, one of the girls was talking about some budgeting she's been doing with a group, and actually, because they're so good at the budgeting, she can't get this budget spent. So that group are working really closely with their worker on, this is what's important to us, this is what we'd like to use the money for, and really putting that power in the hands of the families that we're working with, and a lot of experience-based co-design of the projects and activities that we're running. So, for example, we do festive packages. So we've got a working group around that, which is staff and families and volunteers, and we're reflecting on last year's, looking at this year's, and really doing that collaboratively. So that's some examples of some good practice I think that we have at Fife Gingerbread. We're not quite at citizens control yet. We will get there, but I think for me, it's about doing that in a sort of incremental way so it's manageable for the organisation and it works well for families. So I'm conscious of time, but I think I'll be on my 10 minutes. So I'll briefly just talk about this and talk about participation beyond Fife Gingerbread. So obviously we're really local, we're just in the Fife area, and sometimes it's easy to get caught up in like a Fife bubble, if that makes sense. So we do look at how we can participate in those big systems change spaces that exist, and it's important that we do that. It works well for us to do that in partnership. And I think that, you know, to enable that to happen well, we've invested in our parents forum, their skills, their confidence, and different ways we engage is connecting them with research with different organisations that's happening. When there's consultations out, we co-produce those responses. So an example is DWP had a child maintenance consultation, and our worker actually sat with a group of families, and the response that came from Fife Gingerbread had been co-produced with those families. And we also look at how we can enable membership of different panels that are happening at a sort of national level as well. So how can we skill up and really help our parents see the value of their voice and help them be part of that? So whistle-stop tour, but that's what we're doing at Fife Gingerbread. And these are just some of the reflections on how we make that happen in terms of small steps, strengths-based and reflective practice as well. And that's me, just over 10 minutes.
Thank you so much, Laura. I feel mean that I only gave you 10 minutes and you did well to fit that all in. It was so interesting to hear about the different levels of participation that you've managed to build at Fife Gingerbread. So yeah, please do, as a reminder, pop any questions that you have for any of the panelists as we go along. But for now, I'm going to ask Jenny, who is the Research Participation Officer at Zero Tolerance. If you want to share slides, or if you're not sharing slides, that's equally fine, but I'll pass over to you.
I'm sharing slides, so just give me a second. to do that effectively. It did come up very briefly. There we go.
I can see them. So they're there.
Great. Let me just bring to. Sorry, I have multiple screens and I'm just trying to make sure that I can see my notes. Can everybody hear me okay as well? Great. So I'm Jenny. I'm the Research and Participation Officer at Zero Tolerance. Zero Tolerance is an organisation that's dedicated to preventing men's violence against women and girls, and we do primary prevention work that addresses the root causes of that, so tackling gender inequality and harmful stereotypes. The work that I'm going to talk to you about today kind of sits at the intersection between disability rights and women's rights, and it's kind of recognising that disabled women and non-binary people face unique challenges that require specific attention. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the research. So the purpose of doing it was to deepen our understanding of
Jenny, so sorry to interrupt. We can just to make sure we can see your notes. So if you're able to turn it onto the slideshow, yeah, just there. There you go.
Is that on it? Okay, great. Sorry.
Yeah, it's still on the notes page.
I've got two separate. Let's see. Is that fixed?
Yeah, that's fine. We can see it.
Okay. So the purpose is to just deepen our understanding of the ways that our disabled survivors were experiencing this violence and abuse, and then to create solutions and recommendations with them that will help improve the primary prevention work that we support the Scottish Government to do and other organisations. Our research used a participatory approach. It was actually the Poverty Alliance that came to train our participants and ourselves. We went on the same learning journey as them to really highlight that we were going on the learning journey with them and reduce that idea that there was a difference between us and them as researchers and them as participants, because they're experts in their own knowledge. The approach that we took closely aligned with CEDAW, the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, particularly Articles 3 and 5, which are about intersectional discrimination and challenging harmful stereotypes, and then the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, so it's CRPD, and Article 6 there. And the reason we chose this approach was because we recognise that participants are experts in their own experience, and only by really understanding their experiences could we create prevention materials that would actually help prevent the kind of things that they've been experiencing. So, slide. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the specific methods that we used in the project. So we did a wide variety of things to try and ensure meaningful participation in the project. And I think the meaningful participation is really key here. We offered a number of different things in terms of like co-production and ensuring that participants were involved in co-designing and working through everything in the project together. You know, they decided what recommendations were the most important that went into our briefings and the things that we were asking from the Scottish Government as well. So from beginning to end, we offered flexible participation options. So when working with the disabled survivors we were, it was really important to have flexible sessions based on their needs for breaks, pacing, and understanding that how they feel day to day is really going to change, and we had to be cognizant of that when doing work with them. We also ensured ongoing consent and participant-led analysis. We did work with women with learning disabilities as well, so we did creative methods like art and role play for them to be able to engage in the project in a way that was meaningful for them. and I can talk about a lot more about how we ensured an equal approach and used different kind of methods to ensure that we were getting things right for all of our participants, but particularly with women with learning disabilities. We had particular safeguarding protocol that we used and things like that. So feel free to ask me questions about that, but due to time and the issue with slides, I'm just going to move on. So in terms of empowerment through participatory methods, our approach hopefully empowered participants in multiple ways. They managed to maintain ownership of their knowledge, had control over their participation and how they engaged, and hopefully developed new skills. This promoted agency and self-determination in terms of it allowed them to shape the research questions, the research outcomes, provided opportunities for them to reclaim their experiences, which in feedback they said was really powerful for them. And this closely aligns with kind of those key principles of panel. I think when we talk about empowerment, that also sits alongside sort of challenging those power dynamics that puts a researcher in positions of privilege. So while we are empowering participants, the other side of that is disempowering the researcher and about expanding what we consider to be valid evidence and knowledge, and not reinforcing those narrow conceptions that reinforce the exclusion of disabled survivors. Valuing different forms of knowledge is really key. So we worked with our survivors to do a literature review, but if you read the report, and I'll send a link, first and foremost is their experiences, and only where it's relevant and supports them do we talk about the existing literature, so that front and foremost is their voice and their experience. Sometimes as part of the project, we needed to reframe how we considered and conceptualized success and impact. So what might be considered successful and impactful for zero tolerance is actually different from what is successful and impactful for the survivors. So I can talk a bit about that more in questions, but I think for us to truly be embracing a participatory approach, really making sure that the end results are what is meaningful to the participants was really key. Something that I think is really important to reflect on as well is sometimes there's that full separation between researcher and participant, and there's actually a lot of commonality and things that connect us. There were people doing research in this that had experience of gender-based violence, were disabled themselves. So the research, people doing the research was really nothing about us without us. So take a drink. So in terms of participatory research in human rights, participatory research, if done properly, is a human rights-based approach. And it really aligns with those panel principles that Laura was talking around participation, accountability, non-discrimination, empowerment, and legality. And these principles are really at the core of our approach. We really felt that it was really key that policies and interventions were based on the actual needs and experience of disabled survivors rather than our assumptions about what we might have seen in the literature. And this was really essential for creating an effective rights-based approach in our work with the Scottish Government that's coming out of this. Participatory research recognises participants are rights holders, not just research subjects. And so that recognition is really fundamental to that human rights-based approach, and it acknowledges that disabled survivors have a right to participate in and benefit from research about their lives, not just to be subject to it. So yeah, by not treating disabled survivors as passive subjects and recognising them as active participants, we're kind of able to shift and upholding human rights in terms of respect, dignity, agency of the participants, rather than just doing research to them and mining them for their stories and really not giving them the kind of holistic support that needs to come as part of that. Yeah, and that dignity, autonomy, and self-determination also comes from them making decisions at every stage of the project. So when we were writing it, there were actually stories that our participants wanted to take out. And on reflection, they were like, actually, I don't think I need to share that. I don't think I want that to be out there. And obviously we removed all those things, but if you're not engaging them at every single process, you might miss little bits that they actually sit and reflect on and say, actually, I don't think it's helpful or useful for me to have that part of my life out there for public consumption. So some of the key outcomes of the project were around revealing crucial insights about disabled survivors' experiences, particularly that we cannot really work to tackle gender inequality without tackling ableism as well. Those two things were really inseparable for our participants. Finding out about the unique barriers to support, the specific forms of abuse they experience that were impairment specific, such as people removing their supports, and the process in itself really recognised their expertise, and that this understanding was really critical to highlighting the direct issues that they were facing in their everyday lives. Instead of putting up notes, I put some of the quotes there because fundamental to our work is sharing the voice and the stories of the people who took part. And I think those are some quotes that really highlight that intimate link between gender and ableism that our participants experienced. In terms of challenges and ethical considerations, we faced several challenges and ethical considerations. And I think I'll echo Laura here by saying, when we do participative work, this is not a perfect example. There are things that you get wrong. It's a learning process, and we have lots of things that we're going to change and do differently in the future. We had to balance participation with protection from re-traumatization. Obviously, this is an incredibly emotive topic. Our participants went through really horrible things. With the group of women with learning disabilities, that was the language they wanted to use to describe themselves. They said that we realized that that approach of just talking about experiences and having them talk to each other wasn't going to work for them, and that actually creating vignettes and role play and creating characters for them to discuss experiences through kind of gave them a distance to talk about things that were important to them without kind of putting themselves at risk. And for our other group of participatory that we did participatory research work with, we had debriefing session with a trained rape crisis worker at the end of every session to support them. We also provided BACP counselling sessions for each person who took part, because it was very clear that a little bit of support at the end of each session wasn't going to cut it. So we were flexible, and we arose to the challenges that we were experiencing during the project to make sure that at every stage we were doing the right thing for those involved in the project. So future directions, basically we're moving to expand our participatory approaches, building long-term partnerships. We are creating an intersectional action plan that we're currently looking to get funding for, so that we can make sure, again, that we're paying the people who are involved in these projects with us to kind of make sure that everything we're learning is truly embedded in the work we do across the whole organisation, so that it's really fundamental to everything we do and isn't just something we do here and there. In terms of lessons, I think the project's taught us very valuable lessons about human rights work and addressing both the immediate needs of participants, but also the systemic barriers that they face, and kind of also just the transformative potential of centering marginalized people's voices. Yeah, so it really contributed to fulfilling some of those key things in CDOR and CRPD, providing a model for like inclusive rights-based research. But yeah, we had a lot of things that we needed to learn as part of that. I think a lot of our money that we had for inclusion was actually used for the emotional support, because that was actually more important for the survivors taking part than being able to sit in a room together. So we had to really adapt and develop over time. And I'm sure there are other reflections I could maybe chat about later. So yeah, I just want to say thank you. I'll send the slides so you can access the report or contact me. And I would say, please just look at the report and really see what the participants had to say, because obviously that is the most important thing about this. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jenny. yeah, that would be great. We can share the slides and the link to the report afterwards. As a researcher, it was really inspiring and yeah, insightful to hear about how you've supported the groups you work with through your participatory research at Zero Tolerance. So thank you so much. So last but not least, I am going to pass on to Stephen Drew, who supports End Poverty Edinburgh and is based at Poverty Alliance.
Hello, thank you for that. I am just going to share those slides. Everyone hear me okay? We're all loud and clear. Good, good, good. So thank you. I'm just see if this works. There we go. There we go. I think it's working. So welcome. Hello, my name is Stephen. Thanks for introducing me. It's great to be here to speak about participation. Certainly, as Laura mentioned, my job title is Community Participation Officer. So it's in the name, so it's quite important to my role. So a large part of that, I should say, is because at Poverty Alliance, we understand that poverty is a human rights issue. So to tackle poverty, we believe in the value of taking a human rights-based approach. And the key to this is ensuring that people with experience of poverty are able to participate in the decisions that impact them. And that's briefly what I mean by participation when I'm speaking today. So as Community Participation Officer, a huge part of my role involves working with End Poverty Edinburgh. And they're a group of citizens with lived experience of poverty here in Edinburgh. They're a long-term group, so I should say a lot of what I speak about today is from that perspective. The group was formed way back in 2020 during the latter stages of the Edinburgh Poverty Commission. It's basically resulted in a big report that set out targets to end poverty in Edinburgh by the year 2030. And End Poverty Edinburgh were formed as a sort of legacy group to hold the baton and carry that forward in that movement. So how do we do this? Or as today's session is asking, how do we involve people with lived experience in the decisions that affect them? Primarily, we try to do this by supporting the group to attend a variety of meetings and events, having regular meetings with councillors, as well as holding their own engagements and things like that as a group. We believe that those with lived experience have valuable insight into what works and what doesn't work, and therefore have crucial input into developing services. And it's my job basically to support this in any way I can. So I have to support participation. And similar to what Jenny said, actually, they're to support and maximise their participation in a meaningful way. And I could talk about that for ages, but for now, I've picked a few points that I feel is important to mention when attempting meaningful participation, especially from the human rights perspective. So if any questions come to mind, please jot them down and I'll answer later on. First things first is the biggest thing I found is to be truthful and honest, transparent and genuine. Now, I found this to be crucial, especially when starting with new groups and building relationships. This might sound very straightforward to most people, I'm sure, but I believe it goes very deep, actually. And from the get-go, just for an example, from the get-go, I was honest about my experiences, but I was also honest about what I wasn't aware of. I didn't try to be anything that I wasn't and acknowledge my mistakes. I mean, there was even a couple of times, there was a time I forgot to book a venue in time, and there was a time I forgot to get a couple of emails out that were quite important to the group. Now, it's important just to be open and honest about this and acknowledge the mistakes. You have to be open and honest, and I believe that you have to be genuine. And although there'll be pockets of disappointment here, it helps grow that trust within the group, and that trust is the most important thing. As Linda from our group always says about a certain organisation that we work closely with, she says, "We know you've not got a money tree, but just be honest with us. Treat us as adults. Tell us you're making cuts rather than restructuring." It's about being honest with someone, even if the news that we're giving them isn't exactly what they want to hear. Another important aspect I feel is evaluation and adapting my approaches due to feedback. It's absolutely vital. When members of the group correct me or point things out, that it's very important to take this on board and use it to change the way that we do things. So not only does this ensure that we're working to the group's preferred way, but it also shows that we're listening and we're actually responding to what they're saying. So this is important, especially I feel when trying to keep people involved over long-term projects like End Poverty Edinburgh. And it creates, in my opinion, it creates meaningful involvement with the group's experiences actually moulding our approaches. One example of this yet can be seen how we changed the group's entire meeting structure. Actually, we originally were meeting once a month, for a wee bit longer. I think it was 3 hours. And when reflecting with the group, they decided it'd be better to meet two times a month for 2 hours. They felt that this helped enable their participation a wee bit better because they had 2 chances to get involved. As well as this, we opted to make all the meetings available in person and online for better flexibility. And we've actually been operating like this for well over a year now, so it's just standard for the group. In doing this, we hoped to remove as many barriers to participation as possible. Other ways that we tried to do this was by providing travel support to and from meetings and booking only accessible venues so that everyone can attend in person if they really wanted to. I also make sure there's fruit and snacks and hot drinks and water and things like that available at all the meetings. We also provide vouchers for participation. Now, that is for any occasion that a member is representing End Poverty Edinburgh or sharing their experiences, be that at an in-person event or it might be a written blog. They'll receive vouchers. Now, the Poverty Alliance have a long track record of recognising and compensating people's contributions to our work. We draw this from our values and from working with people experiencing poverty and from our guidance in this area, such as there was a review of legislation, literature and practice produced by Scottish Human Rights Commission. They said it is important that contributions are recognised as a core part of effective human rights work and valued on equal footing with professional efforts and expertise. Payment, whether monetary or in the form of vouchers or in-kind resources, can help to acknowledge the value of these contributions. It can help enable people to participate, particularly those who may face financial hardship, and it can also address inequalities in the status and relationship between professional and lived experience expertise. So that's why we think it's important to provide vouchers and some sort of compensation there. Another aspect is to, if possible, provide training opportunities. So End Poverty Edinburgh, they're sharing some pretty difficult experiences most of the time. It could be spoken events, discussions, and sometimes even with the media. There was actually one occasion where one of our members spoke on the news, and they actually did a great job. They highlighted some of the important issues around housing in that area in the city, and it actually led to one of the families in the area moving into a different property that wasn't infested with mold. Unfortunately, though, when that video was posted online, there was some not so positive comments about our member's appearance and things like that. So, and at the time, she said she was able to cope with this largely in part due to the fact that she'd been prepared slightly through some media training that she received via the Poverty Alliance. She said that she might have actually been affected differently otherwise, and actually some members of the group that saw the comments, they were quite shocked, and they said they would have been. So basically what I'm saying is consideration of training opportunities is a very important aspect of meaningful participation, even if it might not appear at first. This can help us prepare the group as well as develop our skills individually, we found. And since then, we ask occasionally if there's any specific trainings that the group members would like, as well as offer our own. And it's an area we're concentrating much more on going forward. But again, a lot of this comes back to trust. And trust really is one of the big ones. Without that, I mean, how can we really expect people to participate in a meaningful way? How can you expect people to share their experiences and expertise so that we can improve services and, in our case, end poverty in our city without trust? As mentioned earlier, building and maintaining good relationships is really crucial to that trust. Creating a safe, supportive environment where that if a thing happened, like what I was mentioning there about the news report, if that happens, having that safe, supportive environment where they can trust that they'll be supported is really essential. And part of that unquestionably comes down to our honesty and transparency. And a big part of that is managing expectations. I know we've had meetings with council leaders. Some of our members have even met with the First Minister. It's really important that we manage expectations around these and all our meetings really carefully. So before going to meetings, we prepare together, exploring what's realistic and what we genuinely hope to get out of the meeting. For example, last year we held a big event in October for Challenge Poverty Week. Although the council leader was there in attendance himself, we can't expect he's going to do everything we ask. So we have to make sure as a group we're prepared for this. All we can do is present our points, share our experiences and keep applying pressure. Similarly, actually, our group is fortunate enough to hold regular meetings with convener housing, homelessness and fair work. Although we set the agenda and we share experiences and we highlight a lot of important issues, and it's direct to someone with the ability to make some waves here, movement is very slow, so explicitly discussing what we could realistically hope to get out of the meeting is very crucial. Sometimes this can be demoralising for the group, actually, and some members saying so in the past. As one member put it in our 2024 evaluation, which you can find on Poverty Alliance website, they said it can be frustrating how slow things move because of bureaucracy, but I'm seeing tiny changes. Therefore, a massive part of meaningful participation is managing our expectations the best way that we can, whilst also, very importantly, whilst also generating motivation going forward and try to keep the group typed. And we do this by highlighting achievements, celebrating small wins, and reflecting how far we've come, little things like that. As one of our members, Fred, says, you'll be chipping away at the boulder for years and years, and you won't even notice the impact you've made until you take a wee step back and you reflect, and then you can notice it. One key factor I found here is to, where possible, follow up what's been done with the feedback that we've given people so that the group can see how their contributions were used. Another way is to truly follow the group's aspirations and really support them within reason, of course. So that might be on a basic level where we're just deciding events and where we're going to focus our time. It might be, and what invitations to turn down, things like that. But it could be centered around a specific piece of work. And for example, earlier this year, and this is just to wrap this up now, earlier this year, following the general election announcement at the end of May, I asked the group, I said, is there anything you want to do around the election? And they told me, hold our own hustings. So right enough, just a few weeks later, they were doing exactly that, posing questions to representatives from 5 of the major parties. Our members, with the support of myself and the Poverty Alliance, we worked together to plan how it would run. They developed their own questions, invited questions from the public, and eventually they facilitated and delivered it online live as a webinar, just like this, for people to sign up and come along and watch. I mean, they were actually sensational. You need to see it. It's online on the YouTube if you want to check it out. But they kept everyone at time, stepping in when needed, and overall, they facilitated a really interesting conversation around poverty. Their goal ultimately was to hear what candidates proposed to do about poverty so that the voters could be better informed, because they feel like it hadn't been spoke about enough. And I think that they smashed that goal. As amazing as they did, though, we probably wouldn't be able to get to this point without adhering to some of the core principles of participation I've been mentioning. And that is maintaining open and honest, trustworthy relationships, pursuing the interests of the participants and supporting them to fully participate however we can, and always ever reflecting and adapting our approaches. Anyway, I'm going to stop yakking on now, but thank you for listening to me, and I'll take any questions at the end. So thanks so much. Cheers.
That was great. Thank you, Stephen. It was really great to hear about how you've supported meaningful participation and actual examples in practice of how you've done that and what some of the barriers have been. Like, it's not always straightforward, it's not always easy, and how you've really developed a really good structure around building trust and managing expectations, and I like the use of the word, like, just being genuine as well. So thank you so much, Stephen. So we have 15 minutes left, and this is opportunity for people joining us today to ask questions of all of the panelists or to an individual panelist. Please do take that opportunity, because there's a lot of experience and knowledge here. So we've got a question just now in the Q&A from Lynn Pilkington, and the question is, how has technology increased the opportunities for participation, and can you see a role for AI to support this in the future? Very interesting question. So if any of the panelists want to raise their hand to respond to that directly, Jenny, you've got your hand up. That's to you.
Yeah, technology has increased our opportunities for participation because of the complex health issues that some of our participants had. They weren't really able to meet in person, so the fact that everybody has become proficient in Zoom was really helpful. It allowed us to have people that never would have been able to meet with us in person take part and talk about some of the issues that they face. And it helped us to make sure, I guess, like, just being able to email in advance We had participants who took a little while to process things, so we'd send out notes in advance about what we'd be discussing and what actions we'd taken on from the last meeting. So just being able to send out stuff and then not wait for it in the post. There were some people who wanted things posted to them, and we did that as well. Special delivery to make sure it got there after experiences of things not really getting there. In terms of AI, generally, I'm not going to lie, in terms of like a safeguarding data protection kind of risk, I have avoided using AI for any sort of research things. I don't know. I think the issue with some of AI is that it basically mines all the stuff you put in it and uses it to educate itself. But if that's people's personal experiences and information and things like that, so I mean, I think it could be used if you were trying, but you need to strip out anything that was data protected and things like that. So I think it might have a role, but I think how that is used in terms of like our research and participatory work, there would be a lot of red tape, and things would need to change in how AI is used, I think, for us to get on that kind of bandwagon.
Thank you so much, Jenny. Just to say, I noticed hands up. So just to, as a reminder, if you could type questions into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, as it's set up as a webinar. So yeah, only panelists can actually talk during the session. So Stephen, I'll pass over to you.
Thanks a lot. I just wanted to quickly mention on that. I think from my point of view, when I joined with the group, actually everything was online. So it was actually really important. It was really important to have that technology in place because the group wouldn't have been going, as far as I understand it. So that was crucial, and actually it's something that I think has helped engage people. Even last week we had one of our regular meetings, and half of the attendance was online, and that it's not always like that. I mean, sometimes it's everyone in person, but to have that opportunity, I think, is really crucial. Because everyone's got busy lives and stuff like that, and it's hard enough trying to find a meeting time. So it's really helped us in some ways. In other ways, though, I'm also mindful that we don't want, if someone's always online, it's nice to try and get in person. So mindful of things like that as well to try and find opportunities to reconnect us. In terms of AI, I wanted to quickly mention that. I mean, I'm not that experienced with it, so I'm sure there's plenty of potential opportunities for it. But one part I did think might be could maybe be of benefit is I know that it's often used to create images and things like that. So if you're in a hurry for some sort of image that maybe it's useful for things like that, but I don't know if it's really something that we'd be using. But it's something that to always keep an eye on because, as I said, technology has been a huge help to us so far. So I couldn't deny that. So yeah.
Thank you, Stephen. Laura, unless you've got anything to add, there's a few other questions that have popped up, so I'll move on to those. So we have a really good question from Lucy Stroud. So I'll just open it up to the full panel again. So what do you think the biggest challenges are for working with people with lived experience meaningfully? Laura?
I mean, I think time. I think that actually you have to invest an enormous amount of time in building relationships, understanding the strengths. Jenny talked a lot about that, safeguarding, understanding the risks to that person and overall the safeguarding. But I think that often there's a culture, and it's particularly difficult in the third sector where funding plays a part. There's often this like, we need quick results, and that's why I was kind of stressing that it is a journey. I think that if you want to do the participation well, you need to carve out time, you need to be brave, you need to let it evolve quite organically. Do you know, when Stephen was talking about that journey that they've been on through his work in Edinburgh. So I think that, yeah, the biggest challenge is time. It's finding the time and being kind of stubborn that you're not going to rush through this work, because then it won't you won't get the real magic that it has the potential to offer you.
Thank you, Laura. And Jenny, you were wanting to come in as well.
I just want to say that I couldn't agree more with Laura And actually, in order to make sure our project really took the full consideration of everyone involved, giving them time to be involved in each part of the process, we had to extend the time period that was initially suggested. So definitely factor in a lot of time, especially for our trust building with the group of people with learning disabilities and stuff. Like, it takes time to embed and really have fully informed consent, and you're having to do that at every session to make sure that it is consistent and stuff. So yeah, time is such a huge issue, and like you said, people want results immediately, and obviously real participation costs lots of money. So money, yeah, time, I just couldn't agree more. It's such a big barrier. I'll be quiet.
No, don't be quiet. That's really good, reflection. So, and Stephen, over to
Yeah,
you.
just a quick one. I agree with everything everyone said. Actually, time obviously very important. I'll chuck on a wee one at the end there, a wee extra one. I think just I mentioned that briefly in when I was talking, but I think that motivation sometimes can be quite difficult. When things move so slowly, we can be doing some great bits of work, and you're all hyped and motivated, and then it just seems to somehow fizzle out sometimes when you're not hearing back maybe something that's happened. So a lot of time I find motivation can be quite difficult. But I think now we've found a way to sort of keep going with that. So but yeah, I do think that it can be a difficulty. So I think it's something to mention there. Just with the way things really move slow. But that's about it.
Thanks, Stephen. And so there's a question here that might be more directed to you, Jenny, it's about participatory research, but obviously open to all. So how long does it realistically take to ensure a participatory approach within research or a project? A couple of sub-questions. Where would you start? Is there a roadmap to follow for someone who's starting from scratch? Are you happy to? Yeah,
absolutely. I think you need at least 2 years. And that's just with the people you're going to need to build it. So I think in the end, it's taken us 2 years and 9 months. And you've got to build in the time it takes to recruit people, to build trust, engage meaningfully, and things like that. So I think realistically, about 3 years. And then where would you start? And is there a roadmap? I will send the slides. You can email me. I'm happy to send resources. There's some really good, I think it's Porticus just released a report in May about what it means to do meaningful participation, and they do have like a checklist of things that you can follow. I think also coming to things like this and listening to people's mistakes and things they feel they could do better. I feel like Laura and Stephen have really given some really great insights into things like motivation and stuff, and things that are really important. And I think I have the whole plan for our project, so I could share it, and I could also highlight where we needed more time. Recruitment takes a long time as well, and especially with the group we were working with, we had to factor in quite a large dropout as well, because people have complex health needs and they might need to drop out for whatever reason. But I'm happy to send some resources along as well that might help as a starting point to kind of, because there's lots of things, I guess, and that's why people don't really know where to start. So I think I could point in the direction of some stuff as well.
Thank you, Jenny. Yeah, that's useful to hear your reflections, like obviously the time that it involves when you're, particularly if it's a group of people that you've maybe not worked with before, and you're starting to have to build relationships as well. So thank you very much for that. And we have another question around role of arts and role play. So Jenny, this has come from your presentation, but again, if any of the other panelists have something that they want to say around this. So yeah, you mentioned that you'd use that as a creative approach to support participation. So the question is around what types of things did you offer, and how did you capture feedback on that?
Yeah, so the arts and role play stuff that was done included things like creating characters, drawing them, like working out like what are their interests, what color hair do they have, and like painting and drawing the kind of parts of their lives. And then role play stuff was just like when talking about their experience, if they can embody different characters and things, it kind of removes it from that personal nature that can be really distressing. We had specialist people who came in and did that work with them, and people who supported them on a regular basis. So Ryan McLean from Three Sisters Consultancy has a lot of experience doing work with women with learning disabilities, came in and did the arts and the role play work with them. I think somebody said knowing that you don't know everything is really critical. I didn't know everything. We used support from Inclusion Scotland, the Scottish Commission for Learning Disability, and really lent on the people around us and different people with the expertise needed to kind of make sure that we could do meaningful participation. I think we realized really quickly that when we were talking with the women involved, that what we were doing with the other group would not work and wasn't in their interest and wasn't what they wanted to do. It wasn't going to interest them. And if we're being led by what they want and their needs, they want to do something fun. They're still talking about the important things, but making it interactive and fun and kind of playing out complicated situations and how you might diffuse situations and things like that.
Thank you so much, Jenny. Just double checking if there's any other questions. We've only got 4 minutes left, so I might be a bit selfish and just ask a question myself. So Laura, I was just really interested in the fact that you said a third of the workforce at Fife Gingerbread had previously been supported for your organisation, and if you could share anything about the approaches that you've developed to support that movement of people into roles within the staff team at Fife Gingerbread, that would be really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's been like, it is a bit of a journey, that, isn't it? But I think actually, because we support parents to come through a pathway of getting the support that they need and whatever barriers are happening in their lives, and then lots of parents move into volunteering, and then there's a natural progression into work. So we have found that a lot of staff who've joined the organisation have come through that pathway. Do you know, they've volunteered with us, got a bit of a taste for it, and then they've successfully moved into work. What I would say we did was we've done things like we did some progressive recruitment around, we ring fence vacancies and we only put them out to families that we're working with. So we did some sort of really on purpose stuff like that, especially in entry level roles where that was sort of a manageable step into the organisation for a lot of families that we're working with. We've worked hard to really look at our family friendly policies, because all the families we support are families. So we need to think about, you know, is the infrastructure there to make that possible? And we also, you know, created some new roles. We have quite a flat structure in Fife Gingerbread, and we realised that although that's really helpful for a little organisation, that was a big barrier for parents in terms of education requirements for the post. So we tested different things, like a volunteer who was at college. So we employed her while she was at college. We created a different job at a different level. And then when she got her qualification, she moved into the support worker role. So we've actually changed our structure as well in terms of jobs that are available to make that possible. So it does require some careful thought. And I think you have to think about different pathways in, because often as workplaces, what we do is we have our structure set up and then we expect people to be fixed and sort of move into an unchanged workplace. But actually, we need to change the workplace to create different pathways for people with lived experience to join us. So yeah, I mean, I think there's still more to do in that space, but yeah, we're sort of starting to see steps towards that, which is amazing.
Thank you, Laura. That was really interesting. And yeah, great to hear just such diverse experiences from all of you today, and all obviously about supporting participation, but in different ways. So yeah, just to say again, thank you so much. This webinar today will be up on the Poverty Alliance's website, so you can see it there if you want to listen to the excellent speakers again. And as mentioned, we'll be having another webinar in this series looking at accountability. So look out on our website or our news to find out more about that. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
you.
Bye.
Bye.